Samson, I think to start with, it's important. When I saw the report, the publications online attributed to GRA, and that was, I think, a day before the OSP's press conference, I was quite intrigued, and because those publications were essentially saying that GRA says the SML's contract is delivering, and essentially saying that the state is benefiting. Not too long ago, I made a point that Ghanaians need to know that the current GRA commissioner was, I should say, the senior-most person on the audit team that conducted the KPMG audit and made the findings. I think that I should commend President Akufo-Addo for the decision that was taken to appoint KPMG to do the audit and subsequently terminating the aspects of the contract that were yet to start, the upstream petroleum and the minerals revenue assurances component. Of course, the rest were, conditional, that GRA may do this or may do that, and so on and so forth. So it is important for the public to know that Mr. Anthony Sapong, who is now the GRA commissioner appointed by President Mahama, was part of the team that did the KPMG audit when the story first broke, or when President Akufo-Addo commissioned that audit. And so for me, it was quite curious that GRA now issues a statement to sort of suggest that there wasn't anything wrong with the KPMG contract, when the current GRA commissioner was part of the audit team that pointed to a lot of wrongs, including the non-adherence to the public procurement processes. For 3 consecutive times, public PPA says no, and yet eventually the contract gets awarded. There was no approval by the GRA board, and yet the contract gets done. And of course, the fundamental question to ask is, at the time that the SML was being awarded the contract, what was their experience in revenue assurances in the downstream petroleum sector and all of that? None, nothing. In fact, this is a company owned by a timber merchant. And if you look at the ORC, the Office of the Register of Companies documentation about SML, this is a company that is dealing in general commodities, trading, import and export of general goods, and then there is a bit of it that says auditing. So there was nothing to suggest that this is an entity that has any experience in the services that they were procuring. That was when they were incorporated in 2017, February. Yes, but even as SMEL. Even as at the time we were doing the story and we went for the data on the company SML, those were still, the areas of their expertise or what they were into. And yet, they get sole sourced without PPA approval, without the approval of the GRA board, only to later get ratified by PPA. And then initially gets imposed on, West Blue as a subcontractor. I don't think that anybody needed to convince anyone that this must be a company that is so powerful, that you get a multi-million CD contract, sole sourced, without experience, no PPA approval, no board approval. So that for me is a fundamental point that should let everyone know that there must be something curious about this. Is the special prosecutor being fair or a suspicion that may not be fair when he says that Oforiatta takes office in January of 2017, and then in less than 2 weeks or so, the company gets incorporated by the timber merchant, so to speak. And then in a matter of about, 3 months, then they get sole sourced for this job, where all the experts have said they never stood a chance. But when he says Oforiatta must have, all he's saying, you could see that he's trying to suggest that he was the man behind the incorporation of this company just to milk us, to get money where you haven't done any work. But the PPA, they rejected this company a number of times. 3 times. The time that they then go and get a ratification, does it not suggest to you that
they had done their homework well, and that's why they got the ratification. Instead of looking at that to say it's a criminal process, Oforiatta forced them, GRA commissioners were forced by Oforiatta and so on.
Well, I think, I don't know as much as the OSP would know, given the investigations that they have done, entities coming together to conduct this operation. But I think that right from the beginning, there were a lot of curious instances of coincidence. Example is the time the incorporation was done. Another example is the MD of SML, as of 2019, was the technical advisor to the GRA commissioner. Then GRA gives a contract to SML in 2020. And then the technical advisor moves to become the MD of this company that has now gotten a contract without PP approval and all of those things.
So Christian Tetesoti is in GRA?
Yes.
And then,
as a technical advisor.
And then the company gets a contract.
Yes.
Then he becomes the manager of the company.
He becomes the MD of the company.
And it's possible we want somebody from GRA.
Yeah, he had gone on retirement as controller and accountants general, comes to, become the technical advisor to...
This cannot be mere coincidence.
No, well, I'm saying that's why I use the word curious instances of coincidence. Multiple instances of coincidence that are quite curious. The incorporation, the time that, the contract is awarded, who moves from the GRA as a technical advisor to now become the company that has now gotten the contract. The company has no experience. As at the time the story was being done, GRA was the only client to this company. So and obviously when we did the interviews, my colleagues did the interviews, asked the man about the kinds of things that they claim they were doing on their own website.
Yeah.
The MD says, I don't know anything about that. No, we don't do those things. Then he's told, but those things are on your website. He says, well, I don't do anything on website. Curiously, the next day or after, the website is wiped with that information.
Or the afternoon after the...
Yes, that information is then taken out.
That wasn't...
we are told that this is a company that is saving the country 3 billion, cedis as a result of the interventions. The MD is asked.
Front page.
Yes,
daily
front page, daily graphic. The MD is asked about this 3 billion because the data available didn't point to any 3 billion. Then he says, oh, what I know is 1 billion. I don't know about any 3 billion. So quite clearly.
People could misspeak.
Well, but in fact, the IT officer who said he did the presentation, then whispered to Christian Tetesoti to say that, oh, well, if the media reported 3 billion, it must have been a mistake. Then they are told, but if the media got it wrong, the 3 billion is on your website. The media couldn't have come to put the 3 billion on your website. Then Tetesoti says, oh, I don't know anything about 3 billion. So quite clearly, this was a deal that was made. And I would agree with the OSP in saying that this couldn't have been just a normal procured contract. And if you look at the amount of money involved, and then in the investigations, it was clear that whatever SML said they were doing, the state agencies were doing it. So even GRA officials were surprised. So during the interview, a GRA officer says, I would want you to get the SML officer to clarify whether indeed they are involved in issues of diversion of fuel, dilution of fuel, and all of that as they claim they do. And so that was the first question put to the MD. Then the MD says, no, we don't do that. So GRA was doing some of the things that they had claimed they were doing. MPA, we interviewed Mustafa Hamid. Mustafa says, I'm shocked that another entity will say they are doing this because these are things that the MPA is doing. And for example, in terms of revenue assurance, we have systems in place that if you are an OMC who owes, you can't even lift. Beyond that, every increment is then attributed to SML. That, it's because of SML that we have had an increment, in the oil liftings, which is not true. Because if you look at the MPA data year on year, there is an increment. In fact, there is a story that we are looking into. if you look at the 2024 volumes, it's almost like quadruple, or triple the number the previous year. And we are saying, what happened? What could have caused this major jump between 2023 and 2024? And in fact, this new regime came in, and they are, if you look at the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter volumes, it's almost a build-up on the 2024 volumes. And we are saying this is not normal. So these are things that we are looking into. So I perfectly agree with the OSP, and I commend them for the comprehensive work that has been done that basically affirms all that we had discovered. And of course, colleagues Manasseh, Evans, and Ajua, did a diligent job, and subsequently the petition filed to them.
And they also have guys at the Africa Energy Policy.
You mean ASEP?
Yes, ASEP.
Africa Center for Energy Policy.
Yes. What's his name?
Bemboache and co.
Yeah, because I remember the documentary.
Yes.
These are the guys who were speaking.
Yes.
I remember the foremost tax experts, procurement expert.
Yes.
Kwesi Bedu,
Yes.
they all spoke.
Yes.
Atabedu.
And all of them saying...
But you see, the claims that you made, which the OSP does even a deeper research into, investigations into, the SML is disputing some of them. For example, when you say, because at the initial stages, they took they were submitted for sole sourcing 3 times to PPA and they were rejected. That's why they changed their name from SMEL to SML as a way of confusing the system and to get the contract. They said that's not what they did. All they were doing was just brand sort of enhancement. So they didn't do it to trick anybody.
Well, I think the OSP makes that point. But in the story that was done by the Fourth Estate, that point is never made, that they had to rebrand in order to qualify for the PPA approval. In any case, I don't think that the approval processes is about name. It's really about capacity, experience, and all of that. And of course, at that time, PPA would have been questioning, what is the experience of this company to be sole sourced for this kind of job? And that is why consistently they were disapproved. And then, of course, the powers that be allowed such a contract to be signed. And I was quite surprised that even on the basis of the KPMG audit, I think that the president ought to have, basically authorized for a termination of the entire contract.
You mean
President Akufo-Addo? Yes. Because the infractions
he terminated about 2 of them.
No,
those that have not yet started.
Yes, they hadn't started. So what was the point?
Because you, in the documentary, made the point that in that regard, they are also going to earn money, get money for no work done.
Yes.
In our minerals, sector, gold and other mineral sector. And then he stopped it. So that was good. So
the point was that based on the downstream petroleum sector work that is being done and the amounts of money that being paid, over 24 million, every month, and all of that. We thought, look, if this was a scheme that is not delivering any value for money, why should we now add on upstream petroleum and the mineral royalties, revenue assurance to the same entity? Essentially, the same thing happening downstream is going to happen upstream and in the mineral sector. And of course, it hadn't started, so the president terminated.
Okay.
There is even an argument about whether this required parliamentary approval because it was a multi-year contract.
KPMG had recommended that